Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Devoted lovers, holy fuckers, we love you. It's never gonna get old. Every time I say it, I love it more. Welcome into this space. We are going to be bringing something really powerful today that has been, I would say, foundational for us. It's one of our foundational teachings in Union, and we talked about this a little bit last week that we would bring this in. So it's the crisis to creation template. And wherever you are, wherever you sit right now in that, this will be really powerful for you to start to implement inside of your relationship, and not just your relationship, but any of your relationships, also your business, the way that you work with wealth. It's like something that you can really bring into every relationship that you have in your life. So this is something that Warren actually channeled, and so he'll be doing most of the speaking, and I'll jump in with him as I feel pulsed into and called to. Um, but yeah, as everyone's landing, just presencing, let's do a little heart check, anchoring you all the way in. If you want to write in the chat what you are walking into the space with.
How are you feeling?
Rearrange.
Did you just like fade out? And she gone.
Here.
Was that your hand, the way of handing me the mic? She's like, put it in the chat how you guys are feeling.
Then I'm gonna slide on back.
And I'm out.
Yeah, full transparency. My back went out, so I'm having an interesting time finding positions that feel good.
Missionary position.
That's the only one.
I'm talking about being on your mission,
Uh-huh.
girl. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. How do we pop the chat? We can see the chat instead of that.
There we go.
There we go. Beautiful. All right. Neutral, grateful, excited, heart feels full, deep in transformational crisis. We feel you there. A lot of crisis happening, cycling on this planet. Cozy, sleepy, beautiful, beautiful. So the other thing that I feel works perfectly with this teaching of crisis to creation is also the shift that's happening for all of us, really, but I see it happening big time with the feminine. And so with a lot of women in particular, this shift from uh, codependence to independence to interdependence to union. And that's really potent and alive right now. And I've been seeing many women, seeing and also feeling many women that are somewhere on that spectrum and um, going from like independence to interdependence and being both inspired and delighted by that invitation and that receptivity, as well as being forced into interdependence. Does anyone relate to that in any way? Any way? Like forced could be like your back is out and you have to receive help or you have to receive support. You have to receive more collaboration. Uh, for example, um, and actually, as we're diving into this, perhaps we can share a bit of our own story. Your back being the perfect thing to then segue into this transmission.
I think also what would be supportive is like a short description of those,
Mhm.
right? Some people might not understand what interdependence means.
Got it. So I'll start with the framework of crisis to creation. And this is really describing the process of expansion or like the cycles of life. Crisis is when you are feeling deeply in, you're just in it, right? It's like I feel like a hot mess right now And relationally, crisis would be like, we are in crisis. It's like red alert. You are in survival, or maybe even beyond just trying to survive. You're just like in crisis. And then the second phase is repair. So repair is where you are consciously focusing on putting effort and energy to repair. That could be to heal, to transform, to come into greater harmony, to come into greater unity. That's repair. And then there is expansion. And this is where you are starting to be on the, I guess, the expansion side of the wave versus the contraction, right? So expansion comes after or comes with contraction or comes from the contraction. If you imagine, it's like there's a contraction, expansion, and life flows like that. And then creation is where you are in the creator seat, being the divine creator, lovely being that you are, and you're in the stream of life. You're in the progressive, proactive stream of creation. So that is these are cycles that we all go through individually and also relationally.
Can someone type those into the chat? I'm actually going to play with receiving.
Yes, please.
So there's crisis, repair,
Expansion,
expansion, creation. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Lavina. Crisis, repair, expansion, creation. And if you would type into the chat, where do you feel like you are? And you're not necessarily in one space versus the other. Like, where do you feel like your baseline is right now? Like, you could have, like with us, I would say we're like 5% in repair. Um, and maybe 70% in expansion and 20% in creation, right? So where do you feel like your baseline is right now? It's just kind of like what's consuming most of your life force right now. All right, between crisis and repair, repair moving into expansion. I love this. Yes, crisis, repair, expansion, and creation. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Thank you guys for sharing repair and expansion. Nice, nice. I like the percentages. It's a really cool way of working with this energy.
Mhm.
All right. And did you want me to share the independence, interdependence?
If you feel like it flows with this moment.
Uh, yeah, I'll just go ahead and share it since I already spoke it. So we are also evolving as souls, individually, collectively, and together through these different stages of going from codependence to independence to interdependence into union. And this is not a perfectly linear path. It's not a perfect equation as well, but you can track this probably with any of your relationships and also in your relationship with God, with the creator. And so in relationship, we've all experienced codependency, even if you don't feel like you're codependent, right? Codependency is an energy. And if you imagine that if you're moving towards union, then you're getting closer and closer towards unity with source. And in relationship, it would be unity with another person. If you move this way, yes? Are you just smiling?
Yeah, I'm loving
Oh, okay.
I'm like
If
loving
you're
it.
if you're moving this way, you're moving more and more towards, you could say, separation or being more cut off from source, from your true self, right?
Mhm.
And again, these are all cycles that we go through. And the reason I brought it up today is because I have just been witness to and feel so much of the feminine in general kind of doing this full circle moment where a lot of highly capable women in particular, mostly, are, doing their thing and kicking ass, but they're moving into interdependence. And as I said, either being forced into it through chaos, through crisis, through, oh my gosh, I have to have support. I need support. And so I'm opening myself to receive from need to being forced. to receive that support. Or on the other end of the spectrum would be I'm consciously expanding and opening to receive, and I'm receiving more and more beyond my own self.
Mhm. Awesome, babe.
All right.
Yeah, and if you know where you're at on that scale as well, and similarly, you could be oscillating, I feel like also in different relationships, sometimes you're experiencing different things. And so you might not have codependence in your relationship, but you might have codependence with your clients or mentors or people like that. You can start to see where some of these dynamics start to play out based on the circumstances that they're inside of. So if you can get a sense of where you are currently oscillating in, maybe it is from, I think I see a lot of people oscillating from like independence into interdependence, but you could be moving from interdependence into union as well.
Yeah. Where would you say you are?
I'm I oscillate from independence to interdependence to union quite frequently.
Yeah.
Like I could do it all in a day, even.
Yeah. Yeah. And where would you say your baseline is, like where your rooted is, your most stable home within those three
Mm,
energies?
I feel like it's interdependence union, but when let's say like something happens that feels like it almost shakes up a primal energy. So let's say there's something regarding money or like a safety, a home, like something that I'm like, I need to create safety. Independence switches on like that. It's like this very innate, couldn't even, sometimes I can't even tell that I've done that. And so it just happens really in a primal instinct of like, I'm going to take care of myself.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like, when I said that there's a full circle moment happening, with the rise of the feminine and just this greater sense of balance and harmony and union between masculine and feminine, I feel like, if you just kind of track the rise of the feminine from, the feminist movement to equality and all these different things and then leadership and that, and I say this with compassion, women have had to take care of themselves, which is different than being capable of taking care of yourself, which is a strength. That's part of your goddess essence, your god essence, right? Is is resourcefulness, connection to source. And so it's innate within all of us to have the capacity to take care of ourselves. But what I feel like we're evolving from is a lot of women, and this applies to men too, having to take care of themselves, right? And so
Mhm.
this has shaped part of the independence identity. And raise your hand if this is landing, if it's making sense. Yeah. And so which is why I like a lot of women that I know in the last year and a half have had that are like, millionaires have had like significant financial challenges that are catalyzing or forcing them to open to receive more and kind of heal the relationship with the divine masculine. Um, so that's a little bit on that. And thank you guys for sharing your comments. So let's get into it because what I would love for you to learn about yourself and receive support on. One is to see where you're at in this cycle, which some of you guys already put that in the chat. But one of the parts of this teaching is that when we anchor ourselves in creation, right? This is the expansive side of the wave. This could be through your mission, through your vision, through the highest timeline version of all of your desires. When you anchor yourself in something greater, it also helps you move through these other phases much more swiftly, right? Conversely, if most of your attention, for example, if you're in repair, if most of your attention, your intention, your focus, and your action is on repair, but very little of your attention or presence is anchored in expansion and creation, then inevitably it's going to draw out that cycle of repair and make it more challenging. And ultimately, inside of crisis is creation. It's the seed of creation, the call towards creation, call towards source, the call towards love, the call towards your divinity back over here when you're in pure creation. You're like, I feel like a superhero again. That doesn't go away. That doesn't ever go away. And so part of what we found to be very valuable is to anchor ourselves in creation. And what this looks like practically is devotion and prioritizing. You want to add something to this?
No, keep going.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'm ready.
In creation, like one way you can look at this is like, okay, not just what is happening, what are we being challenged with, but what is the seed of creation that's present inside of the challenge? Where's this taking us? You know, if you're looking at it within yourself, where is this taking me? What is the calling of spirit that is existing inside of the crisis? Obviously, if you're in crisis and you feel, you know, if you're a hot mess or you're in a storm of emotions, then a lot of your bandwidth is being used up, you know, dealing with or however you're meeting those emotions. But this is why it's powerful to ask the question. So I would love for you guys to be thinking about that and maybe even ask yourself that question. And if you have a clear answer, share it in the comments. Like, what is emerging from this crisis or this repair? And if it's relationally speaking, you know, and I think we can give our own example, right? So, yeah, please.
Yeah. So I feel like just something that's important to remember about this and also really attune to is this is what is happening micro to macro. This is how we navigate. This is why the world is in the state that it's in, because it's always in a state of crisis or repair and never really going all the way into creation. So we're seeing this on a global scale of how things are handled and navigated. And this is, I want to say, this is why it's so conditioned in us to just constantly cycle most of the time through crisis and repair. Let me just get through this. Let me just get through this crisis. And then once I've navigated that, then we'll just, you know, this is where people in relationship kind of just hang out in like a settling or a mediocre space, because it's like, let's just get back to good. And then if there's nothing that's actually carrying them or spiraling them all the way into a higher timeline of the relationship, then it'll be so easy to backtrack and loop. You know, when you see a lot of looping in relationship dynamics, a lot of looping with money, a lot of looping with something that's happening in any relational dynamic, it is absolutely because there's not a higher vision or creation for the relationship itself. It's just, let's get back to good. Let's get back to normal. I just want to get back. Let's like just get through this. It's like, you know, when somebody, I use the example of like scarcity and money very often because we see this so commonly with people when it's like, I just need to get through this scarcity, but then there's not actually something that's pulling them all the way into what's the highest timeline of your wealth look like beyond just getting through paying the bills, making sure that you get through this moment. There's something that's carrying you beyond for years to come, generational wealth. Like, what does that look like for you? It's the same thing for your relationships and your family. And, you know, I've seen this happen even in client mentor dynamics, where if there's not a clear creation in the field for the client mentor dynamic, that will also just constantly be looping from, okay, we're just always in repair, come in and we're going to focus on what we can repair instead of what are we creating together. Right. And so this is so powerful for you to really work within every dynamic of your life.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, another way to connect to this and see where you're at is the energy of need. It's like if the support and collaboration that's available to you in your life from your partner, from your friends, from the world, if it primarily is coming through need, meaning like, oh, I'll ask for support when I need support, then even though that is a state of empowerment, right? It's up there. It's still in comparison to union, because we talked about interdependence union, right? It's still a state of mediocrity in a sense, because it's limited by need. That's showing an identity, right? It's showing an identity, or like almost like a mental structure. Like, I'll ask for help when I need it, which usually means if I don't need it and I'm capable of doing it myself, then I won't ask for help. But that's such a limiting frame to exist in, that I'll ask for help when I need it, when there's so much more help and support and collaboration that is available. And going back to what Chelsea was saying, on a global scale, it's like, you know, being forced into, for example, banding together to uh to help out, in COVID or in crisis or what's going on in the Middle East, all of the energy that gets expressed in coming together because we have to come together, or because we believe or feel we have to come together. The idea here, because that's like, we're talking about, okay, we're in repair, we're in crisis, or we're in repair. It's obvious, it's activated this inner fire, and was like, okay, we got to band together. We live on the same block, and like, we're all in the flood right now. We had a little mini flood in Topanga. It wasn't that serious, but still, like, everybody's banding together. We were texting each other, was like, hey, you okay? You okay? You want to stay at my place? Cool. Everybody. So what I'm saying is that there's that, and that's awesome. That's a state of empowerment. The bigger picture that we're revealing here is, what would happen if it didn't require a deep need to respond to the call to band together? What does that world look like? It looks like a new earth is what it looks like, right? So we have collectively, habitually been like, we're like these little stubborn little kids that just like, we need a sufficient amount of chaos or crisis sometimes to listen to the calling, to listen to the whispers of our own desire. We know it's our own desire, because when we band together, even if it's in crisis or repair, raise your hand if something about it just feels right. It feels good. It feels like the heart, the spirit is just like, man, this feels good. To me, that's evidence that it's already a calling. So the question, the invitation, and why this teaching is existing or got created is like, okay, what if we could tap into that seed, to that calling, to that whisper of the soul before it becomes a yell, and then put our devotion and prioritization towards that? That changes the whole game. That changes the whole game. And that is a collective pattern. And I'm just saying this, like, we historically need, with certain things that really, really matter, we need, or we seem to need, to get our ass kicked sufficiently before we answer the inner calling, or that seed that's contained. The seed is there in crisis. It's just more obvious. Or no, it's often less obvious, unless it's like life or death. It's there, it's there, it's there. So even with Chelsea and I, like right now, I would say that we're not in crisis. We've had a little bit of repair, but we're not anchored in repair. But even maintenance, toleration, these are still somewhere on the spectrum, moving from survival into crisis, into creation, from surviving into thriving. It's another way to describe this path. It's like, okay, survival. Neutral might be survival for you. It might not. It might be thriving, or neutrals. Anyway, so yeah, where are you guys at? Because right at that edge is what's emerging, what's opening. Do you want to say something? I can feel you.
Yeah, I love that you can feel me.
I'm like,
also love,
you're talking to me.
I love that Zach says maybe the seed needs wildfire to germinate, right? So that's the thing. We see the most natural, organic. We can watch how the earth and how nature moves through these different cycles so powerfully, naturally, and organically. And I will say that relationships, a lot of times, like, crisis or chaos, it's necessary sometimes. It's almost like the amplification of that moment is what's needing to happen to then catapult you forward. But what we're speaking to as well is like, yeah, sometimes you need the wildfire, sometimes you need the chaos, sometimes you need the crisis to help move you through an entirely new cycle of opening that's wanting to happen in the relationship. If you are constantly,
That's really the message here is
then there's a loop.
the habitual focus in the wildfire as the primary means of being progressive towards the highest timeline of creation.
Right.
That
Yes.
that's really the message here. Obviously, the wildfire, literally, metaphorically, is a very potent, essential, and effective catalyst. A
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And it's like it says in the Bible. I like when I quote a Bible quote. Where there is no vision, the people will perish, right? And so vision is an energy that pulls us forward. It is an energy to include and anchor oneself in that. And that's what we're describing when we say creation,
Mm-hmm.
vision,
Mm-hmm.
highest timeline,
Mm-hmm.
purpose. Why are we here? What's the purpose of this relationship? Why does this matter? What is it making? Why is it? What's making it worth it for us to be in crisis right now?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you're going to the gym, sometimes you're getting your ass kicked, but part of what makes it worth it and drives you and allows you to go through it is you have a vision. You have a vision of your ultimate health, your optimal health, your ultimate body, right? So it's that vision. If you didn't have that vision, then you may not last that long in the gym, especially when it gets hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the
Mm-hmm.
gym analogy is a great analogy because there's life force, there's aliveness, there's inspiration, there's imagination, there's vision contained inside of the calling towards your idea of the optimal body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what will also then, when you're going through, wow, this feels like I'm in crisis right now, or my muscles are in repair right now, right? It's part of the life energy that will keep you going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Without that vision, I'm sure we've all had our own experience of this. How long do you stay going to the gym?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
And for those of you that are single and you're not in a relationship and you're like, well, this doesn't even apply to me right now. Absolutely, it does. Because if you don't have a higher vision for the relationship that you're here to ultimately be a part of or be coming into the higher vision with God, with the relationship that's coming, with the union that is on the way, then you will constantly find yourself in a loop of repair and crisis again to amplify you all the way forward, right? So there, yes, it definitely applies all the way through wherever you're at because it will teach you a lot about what's happening relationally and around you. And ultimately what I think creation is the highest timeline. It's the highest timeline of relationship. It's the highest timeline of your love. It's the highest timeline of your union. It's the highest timeline of your business and your mission. It's the highest timeline of your wealth. If you're not even allowing yourself to sit in that for 5 minutes, and ask yourself in co-creation with God, what is this? What is this supposed to be, right? Then there's something that it's like, can you actually sit in the receptivity of that possibility? And I really appreciate what Susie says. This is something that I've talked about before with women in particular. This is very important. Your desire for something is so much more powerful. Your desire as a woman is your superpower. Your desire for something is so much more powerful than your need to get away from something. If you're always just trying to get away from something, to get away from scarcity, to get out of a looping trauma dynamic, to get away from fuck boys, to get away from this, to get away from that. Fuck boys don't exist, but I'm just saying, like, using it as an example. I'm speaking to the
Preach.
terms to get away from. That's crisis to repair, crisis to repair, crisis to repair, crisis to repair, because you're not actually playing with your superpower, which is desire all the way through for what you want, to feel it in your body, to like take it all the way in and actually sit for a moment. It's your gift to hold that sensation and that knowing and that desire in your system for what you want. Now, the sensation is when it doesn't happen right away. And it's like, oh, can I still hold it all the way into the fulfillment of the creation? Right? Or am I going to collapse back into crisis to then try to catapult this lesson all the way through? There's so many like gems and nuances in this for everyone. I'm like, oh, this is like so, I mean, we're just in relationship with life. So this is so good.
And the beauty is that whenever your desire is calling you, whenever spirit is calling you, whenever life is calling you, like legitimately, like meaning it's alive inside you, then it means that you're ready. This is another piece of this that I want to speak to, because it's like two things can be happening at the same time, and often many things are happening at the same time. You could be in crisis or repair or focusing on healing or gaining more knowledge, more information, more confidence, more power, more something. And at the same time, when spirit is calling, it means you're ready. So sometimes what happens to all of us is, and this is why when I say focused primarily on crisis or repair, is that while we're in this repair, while we're in this healing or transformation, we might assume that, oh, I need the transformation to happen before I can allow in my desire, or before I can allow in creation. And that's one of the ways that we impose limitations on creation, right? A very tangible way to say that is that you can be healing and making money at the same time. You could be in the transformational process of coming into greater union and falling in love with yourself and manifest a partnership. Maybe that's the right thing, maybe it's not. But the idea here is to not impose our own limitations on the stream of creation and let the grand organized design, God, dance with you. And so then you can have your ideas about what you feel or think you're ready for or not, and still be open. And this is why opening yourself to the highest timeline, to your desire, is a good thing to do, even while you're, you know, um, in crisis or repair. I'll give a good example of this for us. And this wasn't a crisis repair thing, but it illustrates the same point of like what we mean when we say anchor yourself in the highest timeline. A little while back, when Chelsea and I were looking for a house, and we were like doing Airbnbs, and then in our mind, we were like, oh, well, we're looking for a house to rent or to lease. And we found one, and we fell in love with it, and we're like, wow, this is our house. And then at some point, when we were looking for a house again, our lease expired. We were in Europe, and we were filling out an application. Some of you maybe have heard this story. We were filling out an application for another house, and we were literally like falling asleep. Our energy was dropping around our own inspiration. And we're like, what is going on here? It's like neither one of us is in love with details and spreadsheets and all that shit. That's obvious. But still, we do what we need to do. But I was like, how's it going over there, boo? Your application? She's like, I'm doing good. We're literally, and then we both had a moment. We were like, stop for a second. Wait, hold on. What the fuck is going on here? And when we tuned in, and feel free to jump in if I'm missing a key part of the story, when we tuned in and we're like, what's going on here?
We just took a pause. Yeah.
We took a pause.
We took a pause. We're like, something's off.
Something's off. And what came to us is buying a house. Now, in our minds, we could have been like, but we're not ready to buy a house. But what came to us is buying a house. That's a timeline. That's a version of us. And what we realized in that moment is, oh, the decision to buy a house was calling us. It was calling us, and we hadn't said yes to it. We talked about buying a house. We knew we would eventually buy a house, but the decision, give me some snaps if you feel me on this, because I'm emphasizing it because that's still non-physical. It's like a decision, right? The decision energy was the life force that was trying to come into our body by us claiming it. So when we decided, it was like, oh, we're buying a house, it didn't mean that we're buying a house in that moment. But what it meant is that the version of us in the timeline that has a house, that is buying a house, was actually present. That's a higher timeline. That is the vision that was calling us towards it.
Mhm.
Right. So it wasn't bad if we would have like rented a house. We are renting houses, but we also decided in that moment, oh, because we thought getting another year-long lease and then working our way towards buying a house was the highest timeline. But we were still being called to make the decision. And it changed everything. Literally, like if you, I wish we could have seen a camera on us. All of our life force came back in. We went from falling asleep to like, we're just like, yeah, yeah, right, right. And we're just like, it's on in a moment. So I'm using that as an example for us, but also if you're like trying to scan your life, that's an example of something that's more subtle because we weren't in crisis. We weren't in lack. We were in a very abundant reality of we're staying in amazing spaces. We're going to get another lease. This is awesome. We're looking at an awesome house. But the contrast between what spirit was calling us towards and where we were at was still a point of contrast that made everything more difficult. Everything was more difficult.
Yeah, and another element that I think, because I know a lot of people on here are facilitators or run a business in some capacity, another element that really came through was, for a long time, Oren and I have, it's like we have like things that we run together, like Holy Fuck, we do retreats and in-person experiences. And it came through very clearly, similarly with this, is like when you're holding the highest timeline creation for your relationship and your mission and your wealth, it really starts to inform everything else. And so with this like house decision, there was also, decisions of, okay, well, how are we building out the infrastructure and all these elements within our business so that we can see for many, many months and even years to come how this is like, feasible. So it's like it's like you're starting to plant the seed of the creation, but it's also taking it and starting to move it forward. Yes, with action. Yes, with movement. Yes, with, hiring team and doing these things where we're like building out the foundation of that. And so, yeah, it's not just like, okay, we're going to get a house. We'll see, like, hope that happens. Like, see you later. There is also action that's moving with that. And I always like to really invite with that highest creation piece. I love that Susie said, yeah, sometimes I collapse when I have a really strong vision for something. And I see this happen very often is like, when you're holding the desire for union, or if you have a lunch that you're inside of, or you're holding a desire for a home, the collapsing happens because there is meant to be a stronger backbone of what your system is being ready to actually hold. And so that's where, again, crisis and repair and going through the cycle would be important, because you're learning to hold, again, talked about this on the last call, is like you're not holding it by yourself. You'd start to dissolve into the field and let the field hold you, but you will start to notice where these bigger, whatever bigger is, these higher timeline experiences and creations really start to like become through you, birth through you, instead of you feeling like you have to do so much to get there. They will teach you a lot about receptivity. I would almost say that simultaneously, you could look at the codependence to union, they would all match in with the same element of union would move into creation on that timeline. So when you're actually in the highest realm of creation in your life, you are simultaneously experiencing deep union with God, co-creation with God, co-creation with your partner, right? So to actually be in the highest point of creation.
Yeah, and I want to add something that I think is really important here. So we're talking about crisis, repair, expansion, creation, finding yourself on that in your relationship or just in relationship with yourself or with life. Also, I said the seed of creation is inside of crisis. Sometimes we're actually in crisis or repair simply because we're not receiving the seed of creation. Let me say that again so it lands. Sometimes We are actually in crisis or repair simply because we're not receiving that seed of creation, that call towards creation. So I'll give a specific example. It's like, if raise your hand if you're a coach, or if you have a business that you're serving people with. Okay, right. An example as a coach is like, you're an exceptional coach and you have clients and you're serving people and you're serving people, but then your soul expands and you start becoming more, the call to become more, whatever more means. It could be more direct, more bold. You're being called into a different client sphere. So more of your potential, more of your talent, which means more life force energy, is trying to be called through you. And then you consciously or unconsciously are like, hold on, soul. Hold on. I'm comfortable. This is comfortable. I'm rocking. I got a 6-figure business. I'm doing my thing over here. Right. I'm in my zone. I'm feeling powerful. I'm feeling confident. But that life force energy of the calling, you don't say yes to it. So it starts to invert. It starts to implode. Right. And then you start struggling in your business. And then if you stay not listening to the calling, the higher vision, the calling towards your expansion as a coach, and you're like, let me double down, let me work harder, let me do more live streams, let me try to get more clients, and it's like, it's not working. That's an example of, not only is the seed of creation in the struggle, but the struggle itself is the resistance to the seed of creation. Somebody say something, or before you say, I just want to know, did that land before we insert anything else? That's a significant.
It's huge. I'd
Okay.
love for you to add in, that piece that Myron Golden was saying was like, God made everything on this earth that works to work. And so when we see something that's not working, it's not because it's not working. It's because you're not actually doing what God brought you here to do.
Right. So what God brought you here to do would be the same stream that we're calling creation, vision, calling, highest timeline. These are all essentially saying the same thing. So another example, and I've experienced this in a relationship, is if one or both people in a relationship is not actually at their leading edge. That could be following their deepest desires or giving in the way that they're capable of giving. Then that energy that's not expressing itself, that's not being given, it implodes, and you'll notice problems start happening in a relationship. So then if you're now struggling with the problems in the relationship, this is another example of, sometimes the problems, the shit that you're noticing that you wouldn't otherwise notice, is not about the problems, it's about the expansion that's trying to happen. Anybody relate to this? You guys bored or captivated, or just does it impact you? Right? So giving all these different examples, not just for your understanding, but to see what's sparking inside you, see what you can feel. How is this correlating in your life, maybe even right now, where more is trying to come through that you're waiting on or that you haven't said yes to, and see if you can make the correlation of like, oh, wow, my body's extra achy. I'm having more arguments than usual. I'm more tired than usual. And maybe it's because this invitation, this calling is present. And it might simply be that you're struggling because you haven't said yes to it and you're actually ready. Nice.
Mm.
I've experienced this so many times. That's how I know this. It was like, been in relationships, and it's just like, man, why does there seem like there's a lot of conflict? I'm like, oh, it's my potential.
Mm.
It's my potential. It's inverted.
Yeah. And I feel like always remembering this, again, coming back to the piece for the women, is like, you can shift the field of every relationship, every dynamic, every space that you walk into. And this is important, right? It's like sometimes the space or the relationship will agitate you or irritate you because you're not actually in your oracular vision, your knowing, your channel of wisdom, your womb, your body. You're not actually giving your gifts into the space as they are being called upon, right? And so I've seen this happen probably time and time and time again. I think Katie was sharing something in the Telegram group that was really in connection to this, is like, it can be really easy to lean into the direction of feeling like, oh my gosh, why is there so much crisis or repair? Or why do I feel this way? Resentment in my system. If you're not actually living in your own devotion to your own heart or your own gifts, or offering into this space what you feel you're meant to be offering, then it will become inverted all the way. And then it will be like, oh, there's a problem here between you and I, instead of actually owning the fact that the crisis is always starting within first, and then it's being amplified and reflected in the field of the relationship. Right? It's like that's why relationship is the most powerful teacher on the planet. It is the master teacher because it will always amplify and reflect anything that is hidden in the field. It will always pull out everything that is needed. It knows exactly what to do to actually, like, it is its own healing process. It will always try to find its way back into homeostasis, just like our bodies do. And sometimes they go through the healing crisis. Sometimes there is crisis to get to deeper healing, but just trust that your relationship is always trying to take you all the way back into homeostasis and beyond, like the most vibrant health that it's ever had.
Amen. So how can we be of service to you in this? You guys are receiving, being activated, reflecting, sharing. Does anyone want some assistance or have a question, right? A question that helps. Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like it would be good to know how to like move from one to the next to the next.
Yeah. So a general framework from moving from one to the next, whether you're looking at it as a stage or just like a moment, is it's like love and truth. It's almost like the masculine and the feminine, right? The feminine is the compassion, the witnessing, the unconditional love, right? Which gives space, it gives witness, it gives, allowing, because essentially wherever we're stuck or wherever we're not answering the call, usually what's happening in the heart is we're feeling afraid, we're feeling unsafe, right? And so just bringing love into that fear, into wherever you're not feeling safe, into wherever it's feeling sensitive, um, is like the first step. If I were to put it in a kind of a process, right? And then as you are uh, being present with whatever feelings are going on beneath the surface or within the crisis or repair, if that's how you're experiencing it, then what it'll do is it'll start freeing up space to allow the seed of creation that we're speaking of, that vision, that higher timeline. But initially, it might just be like a movement of life force energy, right? That starts to like move and alchemize itself towards inspiration. And this is where you can then see like what is true here? You know, what's the truth? And this is starting to get into the masculine in the sense of like, what's the clarity? What's the direction? What's the vision? Which then goes into like, is there any action coming out of this? And so recently with Chelsea and I, for example, we were in one of these cycles and we were presencing like the stuff that was coming up from the unconscious that was getting amplified in our field. And we did that first step. And then from there, it's like, okay, and what are we anchoring ourselves in? What are we deciding? How are we uniting our energy and our intention moving from this wave of expansion? Right. And that, yes.
Keep going.
That in our case was a discussion, and it was, for me, it was asking her questions too, like, okay, this is what I see, this is what where I see this is taking us, this is what is new that we're expanding into, and I'm devoted, I'm here, I'm on board. And rather than just assume that she's on board because she's Chelsea and she's a badass and she always is, asking her and us speaking it is now speaking life into. This is where we use our will and our intent and the power of our decision to say yes to, right? Which is a big step. That's why I gave the subtle example of the house and us making a decision. I was like, a decision, because it's such an intangible thing. It's not the words. You could think you've made a decision, but you haven't. And sometimes in relationship, there are these kind of wavy, fuzzy assumptions that aren't really like agreements or decisions. And so that was the second part of our process.
Yeah, and I want to speak a little bit more to the repair piece. Love you, Louisa. Ah, yeah, the repair piece, if you're, let's see, so if you're in crisis, as many of you know, if you're in a moment of crisis, there's no capacity to try to even think about creation or, if you're in actual moment of crisis, most of your capacity is being used up on just getting through that
Survival.
moment, nervous system regulation, survival, trying to like ground yourself in. So do not recommend skipping from crisis into creation. You actually need to go. So the next piece is like, as Oren's saying, most important, be with your heart, be what's happening, feel what's happening, be witnessed if you need to. That's why there's the holy ache space within the Telegram group. I feel like one of the most powerful things that helps me move energy most of the time is to just be witnessed in whatever I'm moving through. And then it can start to give like a breath and a life into something I'm not holding by myself anymore. So if you're in crisis, allow that energy to like get through a moment where you're actually anchored into your system. You've moved through the somatic work, you've moved through the rage, the anger, the fear, the survival, at least enough to feel like you have capacity to then go into repair. And so when you're starting to go into repair, you're looking at the crisis and you're like, okay, what is actually being called for here? So if we want to move again from repair, not just from, okay, you good? I'm good. We're good. You good? Okay, great. I'll see you next time in the ring of fire. Like instead of just like making sure it's good, really look at that crisis as Oren's saying, what's the seed of creation? What is it calling for? What is it opening? What is it agitating? What is it asking for? And that's where the repair can start to actually move you into expansion and into creation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, once you're beyond survival or crisis, then you have more space to be in repair. Because as soon as you're in repair, now you have some level of consciousness, you have some level of space to proactively engage with whatever is coming up, whatever you're being challenged with. And this is where you can already begin to now look beyond, not bypass the repair, but bring in the energy of creation and expansion and marry it with the repair. So then you're not only focused on repair, you have this other vision, this other energy that is now helping with the repair. Raise your hand if this makes sense. Like it's like the gym analogy. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're in the repair phase right now, but oh yeah, we're going for the sexy body award. Do you know what I'm saying? Just to use the gym analogy. It's like, oh yeah, right. We're not just trying to repair. We are moving towards this calling or inspiration. When you're in the repair, somewhere in that cycle is where you have space. So that's the time to kind of have that on the table as well. Not to try to jump to expansion or creation, but just to be present and be like, oh, okay. Which then, as I said, it can also make the repair worth it and not feel daunting or not feel like, oh, we're doing this because we have a problem or because we have to, or because that's the other energetic that can get really, that's not really helpful, is to, if you view it and therefore experience it as, oh, we're just having problems right now. There's a massive difference when you're in repair and this is a problem or this is a portal. Those aren't just words. Like literally, you're in a completely different experience if you view it as a portal versus a problem. If you view it as a problem, then you're going to be in this energy of we have to do this versus the love that's in the heart. We love each other, you know, and then the love connects to the spirit. And like, this is the life, this is the creation, this is the vision that we're excited about. And the repair is connected to the vision versus those being two isolated things.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, babe. And there's, you know, the expansion piece. This is what I would say is where God is really wanting to merge with you into that creation. So it's going to require that in your relationship, you start to show up in your relationship, you start to meet these moments in your relationship in a different way. So, you know, for us, it's like if you notice, again, we teach a lot by example, but I would say we kept kind of like hitting up against the same thing time and time and time again. And what really helped us with that is like we were scheduling like meetings like sporadically throughout the week to drop in about different things, and it just kept feeling like there was more and more and more. And so what we did was we created like, you know, Monday is the day where we talk about everything. We talk about finances, heart, dreams, vision, projects. We're like going in devotion every week to do this. And then
This is a great, this is a great example. I want to weave in the project manager thing because that
Yeah.
was a piece of it.
Yeah. So the seed of creation is like paying attention to what's being asked for. It's, you know, for some of you, it might be in relationship. If you're in relationship, it might be, we need to make sure that we're connecting every day. We have a practice every morning. If you're working through relational dynamics with money, it might be you're connecting in with your wealth and looking at your finances every day, once a week, like really starting to get intimate with numbers. Your business, you know, it's like really starting to plan out a bigger creation and look at things ultimately from the top down. We always like to start from the top down. That's what the creation piece is.
Yeah, and one other interesting thing that can happen here, and this has come up several times with us, where let's say, for example, in your business or in your being, you just like, I want to experience more ease. Like, can I get some more ease? Anybody want some more ease in their life? In any dimension of your life, business, money, just more ease, right? Is sometimes when you are present in and you say yes to the calling, which is where the expansion's happening, to your current identity, it might feel like the thing that is going to bring you to the more ease is more difficult, and it may feel like staying where you are is easier. Anybody relate to that? That's a tricky one. That's happened with us several times where it's like wherever we're being called to, it's like, well, you know, we're running up against a cap on like resources, like energy and time, like towards something that's really, really wanted. And then, you know, when spirit would come in and be like, oh, okay, well, then prioritize this. This is what's being asked of you right now. Then help me out here, because usually you're the one going like feeling like, oh, it's taking you more energy to go towards the bigger thing or the ease when it's actually the opposite.
Yeah. I need your help right now.
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my back's really hurting.
Um, does this make sense? And this is a great thing to be aware of, to not let your ego or your mind trick you into thinking that, oh, it's going to be harder over there, right? Versus it feels harder. It's just the resistance that your current identity is feeling to the expansion of spirit, which is why sometimes we can get stuck. We're perceiving that it's going to be harder in the direction that it's going to be easier, and that it's going to be easier in the direction that it's actually harder.
Mhm.
Oh, put your hands out. Give some love to Chelsea real quick. Send you some love.
Yeah. Thanks, Boo. Yeah. Side note, if anyone watched the Sarah Jakes video that I put in the Telegram chat on Sunday, the full circle, at the end of it, she did this prayer, which was like really, really beautiful, which is super connected to what we're talking about. It's like a lot of times when we're in that crisis mode, or we're in that even repair, it's like, God, just, change my circumstances, give me more money, send my lover, make me lose weight, whatever it might be, like buy us the house, just send us the house. And then we'll like, we're like praying for things to happen instead of praying for the change within ourselves so that we can actually be in full receptivity of whatever it is that's happening. It's like, oh, I'm just praying for this thing instead of actually becoming the whole thing. Like I move through life with the fullness and the truth of God inside me. And so, I was like, God, Sunday afternoon, I'm like running around the kitchen, getting ready for our friend's birthday, and I'm like making this cake, and oh my God, change me from the inside out, change me from the inside out, change me from the inside out, just literally like full on praying, speaking. And the next day I woke up and I could not move. And I was like,
You're like,
me
yeah,
like legit.
guys, this is
I'm
what I
like,
have planned.
oh, help me. And it's like this moment where I am having to be really asking for help. I'm like, babe, can you make dinner tonight? Because I need to get a bodywork session. Can you lead the call? Can you put in the chat? Like, I'm like, whoa, there's a full, like, yes, full circle moment of, so I don't end up in this cycle again. So I don't end up in constant crisis around receptivity. It's like teaching me on a visceral, cellular, real-time level how to be in full feminine receptivity. Because that was my highest prayer in that moment, right? So it was just like, bless what you pray for, and also just laughing
It's
at that.
it's the perfect example of like the seed of creation that's existing within the crisis,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like once something already manifests as a crisis, like in this case, it's a physical manifestation, then even though it could seem like it's, oh, now things just got harder. It's like the message, the medicine, the calling. It's
Mm.
like you got a second chance to respond now. You got a third
Mm-hmm.
chance to respond now, to
Mm-hmm.
respond now. So one of the things that I shared with Chelsea, because she was asking me, certain things to help facilitate with this call and like make dinner later, I said, yes, absolutely. It would be my honor to get dinner and whatever else you need. And I reflected to her, I said, part of the calling that's existing in that, the energy that's there present, is for you to receive the love and the support that I'm offering, not just the physical action. Because if put it this way, she received the physical action, but she filtered it through her mind and like, can you make dinner because I can't? I need you to make dinner. Then guess what's happening? You're still going in loop. You're still not getting the message. You're still not actually receiving,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the receiving of the truth. It's the receiving of the love. It's receiving of the truth of how supported you are. That's the medicine. You would say, in this case, that is the lesson. So we can get knocked down and still not get the lesson,
Mm-hmm.
especially if we think, oh, I just need to fix my body and get back up and running and get back to where I was.
See, but I know better than that,
But that
because I know
exactly.
that everything in my body is energy. So I'm like, I did not just knock my back out. Like there's such a deep gift in whatever's happening physically in me. And I've also been approaching it from this where I'm like, okay, I'm listening, I'm receiving, I'm And I think this is probably one of the most important pieces too, is not being a victim to being put back into a crisis, because it's the victimhood and the judgment and the shame that keep us looping as well. It's like, okay, oh, but I can't. No, what's actually happening? Hold on, breathe. Okay. There's a level of receptivity. This is a gift right now that's happening. I can't move. There's a level of being able to receive in a deeper way. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And the truth is, like literally in these examples, is that it's your desire anyway.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's not it's like it's your desire anyway. Like literally, like you like when I tune into the field, like you would love for me to make dinner tonight anyway, even if you couldn't. And that's the thing, is
And
like
I'd love to get body
and
work anyway.
and that's the thing, is just like to look at it without judgment and be like, wait a minute, if that was my desire anyway, then who am I becoming? Who do I get to become to receive that without having to have the stimulation? Oh, I need to receive this, versus like, oh, actually, I would just fucking love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the medicine. That's the vision. That's the desire energy that's inside of the moment of crisis.
And ultimately, that's what we say when it's like, you can choose this. You can literally be in a co-creation with God, or you will get forced into this. It's like, because God knows the highest timeline, plan, destiny of your life and what you are being called into. I've watched people get fired from jobs, relationships end really fast. These things, or you're moving out of your home, you have to go. It's like, these things, when we actually tuned into why our lease ended, it was like, oh, because we're supposed to buy a house.
Right.
So you're looking at a moment that feels like a crisis, and you're like, what the fuck, God? What have you done? Like, why are you putting me in this position again? When actually God is saying, because there is something so much greater that I have in store for you. I need you to be able to see that and feel that and know that. Do you want to co-create with me this time? Or do you need me to keep reminding you?
So I would love to know, I asked this a few minutes ago, but I'm going to put it out there again. Now that we went into the process and how you can kind of move with this energy of wherever you are on the process of from crisis to creation, how can I support you? How can we support you? Do you have any specific questions to your path, wherever your leading edge is? Because you're somewhere on this cycle. Even if you're on the upper echelon and you're like, my life's going fucking amazing right now, it doesn't mean that life's not happening and that creation or more creation is trying to come. So you can meet this wherever you are. Yeah. Does anyone have a question